In this video, I want to show you how to connect your Airstream Bridge and your iPad together using either a router or an external Wi-Fi network. For this example, I've set up an inexpensive Linksys router that I picked up on Amazon for $30, and I found that it works fine, and it really increases the range and the reliability of the connection. I'm going to show you how to do it with the original Airstream app, which some people call the Blue app, and also the Airstream Pro app, which is the, I guess you might call it the Red app. The setup for each of these is slightly different, so I'll go through each separately. And I'll also include a link in the comments below to that Linksys router that I'm using for this demonstration. So in my settings on my iPad under Wi-Fi, you'll see that currently I'm connected to the Airstream Bridge in its normal mode where it's creating its own network. And I'm doing that to start with so that I can show you how to set it up while you're connected that way. And if you'll notice under my networks, I've set up the router as well. And it's listed as Link Router and Link Router 5 gigahertz. And since each router setup might be slightly different, I'm not going to get into how I set up the router. But with dual band routers, usually the 2.4 gigahertz name, it'll be like 5 gigahertz will be tagged onto the end of that name. And they're both basically the same network, but they're running on different frequencies. So the bridge will have to connect to Link Router, which is the 2.4 gigahertz, and then the iPad I want to connect to the 5 gigahertz because that's more open and I'll probably get better range and stuff with that. So one thing you might want to look at here, I'm going to hit the little eye there, and you'll notice I've turned off private Wi-Fi address. That's something where the iPad tries to hide its Wi-Fi address from the network. I've run into problems once in a while unless I turn that off. So I've turned that off there, and then I've turned it off here too. So to start with, let's join that Link Router 5 gigahertz from the iPad here. So it says privacy warning. That's because I turned off that privacy button. And it's also going to show that there's no internet because I don't have that router hooked up to into my modem. So I'm going to hit that little I button there, and I'm going to look at something here. That this is important when you're setting up the Blue app. You'll notice down here at the bottom, it lists the IP address that was assigned to this iPad. It also has the mask and the router address. So when setting up the Blue app, it needs to know addresses. And so you need to take a note of those settings. So you want to take a note of the IP address of the iPad only because you don't want to set the bridge to the same address. And then the subnet mask and the router, you need to take a note of that as well. So once you've done that, let's go back, and I'm going to rejoin the Airstream DMX bridge because I'm going to set it up from my Blue app. I'm connected to the Blue app with the bridge directly. I got the connection notice. So I'm going to go into settings here and advanced settings. And what I want to do is I want to tell it I'm going to join a network instead of using the bridge network. So I'm going to turn on, and it'll tell you it's going to take effect when you reset the bridge. So I'm going to go OK. So it wants to know the name of the network. So if you remember, it was called, and this is important. I want to give it the name of the 2.4 gigahertz network because that's the name of the network that I want the bridge to join. So this is what this is doing is in advanced settings, I'm actually setting up the bridge, and it's going to store this in the bridge's memory. So when I shut it off and turn it back on, it's going to join this network. So it was called Link, capital R, router. And then the password is Link 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's simple enough. Okay, now this is where why I wanted you to take note of the address. This is the default address that's showing here now, but if you remember, that's slightly different than what was in that previous the settings where the iPad is connected to the router. Because in that one, it's 192.168.1.121 is the iPad. So the only thing I want to do here is make sure that it's almost the same address. Like here, it says .0. It has to be .1 because that's what that router was. And that's going to be the same if you're setting it up with, using a home network or something. So I'm going to go ahead and use that 150 because there's only two devices on that network. So one of them is going to be at address 121. This one's going to be at 150. So it's not going to matter. If you're using a home network, you might have 10, 20 devices. You still want to pick a high number, but you got to make sure it doesn't line up with any of the any other devices. So the router is 1.1, and then the mask was the same. So I got to hit done, otherwise it's not going to save. And the other thing I like to do is I like to turn on SACN mode because in that mode, the response, it sends more data over the network, but the lights respond a lot faster. So anyway, so everything is set. So I should be able to go back. I should be able to leave this page here. And what I want to do now is I'm going to turn the power on and off on my bridge, and it should join that Linksys router. And you'll know it's joined an external network because the little LED will flash off twice instead of one time, and that means it's joined an external network. So let me try that and see what happens. So I turned my bridge on and off, and it did what I expected. The light flashed twice, and it joined the link router network. And so what I've done here is I've gone back to settings in my iPad, and I joined the link router 5 gigahertz network. That's because the iPad can do 5 gigahertz or 2.4. If you want to connect it to the 2.4, that's fine too. I just think it'll work better on 5 gigahertz. So I'm going to restart the app, and sometimes it's better to clear the app. Make sure it's starting from scratch because it'll just reset everything a lot better. So I'm going to start it, and it says connected because both the iPad and the bridge are connected to that Linksys router. So now that they're both connected over that external network, you should be able to turn lights on and off and go in and change channels. And if you're in SACN mode, you'll notice that the LED on the bridge will flicker really fast because it's getting a lot more data. And if I were to go back, and I can't really show you that right now, but if I were to go back into settings and advanced settings and turn SACN mode off, what happens is it'll just flicker, like every 2 or 3 times a second, and it just means it's just a slower data mode, and it's a different different method for sending data. So that's how to do it for the blue app. I'm going to get into showing you how to do it with the red app, which it's a little more involved. I'm going to use 2 different apps to do it. I'm going to use the config, the setup app, and then I'll show you how to set the other app settings to make it work. Let's talk about setting up the red app. It's actually, in some ways, it's a little simpler because you don't need to worry about IP addresses because it uses a more of a broadcast type of way of connecting. So right now I'm connected to that external router. I'm going to go back and connect to the bridge directly because I reset the bridge and I turned it on and off, and I set it to set up to run its own network. So let's run the config program. So if you haven't downloaded it, there's a off the App Store. There's a configuration program for the bridge, and let's see. So right now you can see it's set to AP mode, which is its internal network and all the settings that it's normally set to. So what I want to do is from the config app, I want to put it into station mode to where it's going to join that network. So I'm going to turn on the external network, and I'm going to turn on DHCP. And what that means is, rather than having to enter in all those addresses, those IP addresses, it's going to let the router just assign an address for me, because I don't really care what address it gives it. So I need to give it the name of the network. So as before, we're going to go link router, and that's the 2.4 gigahertz network, because it won't join the 5 gigahertz network. It's this, the bridge is 2.4 only. And the password that I gave it was link1234. And I don't care about the IP address, because once DHCP is turned on, IP address is irrelevant. So those are the defaults right there. And when you're using the Red app, you need to turn on SACN on the bridge. So turn that on. And ArtNet we want off, because I want to use SACN. That's a little bit easier to set up. I'm going to leave my Wi-Fi on, because I have some Wi-Fi lights. And that's it. I could either just flip the power, or I can hit this reset button, and that'll reset the bridge for me. And it should, yep, it's flashing twice, so it joined the router network. Okay, we're done here. So now I want to go back to my settings in the iPad and make sure that the iPad is set to the link router. I'm going to join the 5 gigahertz network, and yep, there it goes. So now my bridge is connected to link router, and so is my iPad. So if you start the Red app, you'll notice the bridge will start, the LED will start flashing like a couple times a second. That means it's just getting refreshed. And this app doesn't give you a connection notice, because it's just sending out SACN packets, and it doesn't really care what's out there. It'll just, you can hook other bridges out there, other people's products, and it'll respond as well. So if I select a light that's on, these are the default settings normally for this app, but if you go into patching, you can set your universes. This will support up to 4 universes. And if you go into universe, you want to make sure that at least universe 1 is set up to as SACN, because that's where we set it. So we're using SACN protocol rather than ArtNet. And once you've done that, you select a light, and if I'm using the color picker, I can see that the LED is flashing like crazy, so we know it's working. So I hope I did a good job of explaining this. I know it can be a little bit complicated, but anyway, post on the Facebook support page if you have any questions.